Real estate agent, are you looking to acquire clients consistently so you can grow your business and your income to live a great lifestyle? This is Dave Finale and the RE Skill Builder Podcast.
Here we go. Hello, everybody. Here we are. Sorry, technology gets to me sometimes, but here we are. It is Friday, and the great thing about this week is we were able to actually have two broadcasts this week. We had Brent Gove earlier in the week as a special edition, and today we've got a friend of mine from years ago, Sebastian Rusk, who's all about podcasts, been around the business for a while. He's an MC. He's done a lot of different things. Sebastian, welcome. And thanks for being on the broadcast, which is episode 143, as a matter of fact.
Hey, what's up, dude? Thanks for having me, man. Great to see you, man.
Great to see you too, man. I mean, this is episode 143, and we've done this in 140 weeks. So we've had 3 extra episodes in 140 weeks, and it's just been so much fun. And it's Real Estate Talk TGIF episode 143. Sebastian, do you know what TGIF stands for?
I believe it's Thank God It's Friday.
You are correct, but not in this case. It's actually Thank God It's Finale. And here we are. Thank God It's Finale. It's TGIF Real Estate Talk 143. Sebastian Rusk. Sebastian, welcome again. And tell us, you've got a couple of books out there. You're a podcaster, and I met you as an MC a number of years ago. Talk to me. Tell me your story. Tell me where you came from, why this has been so good for you, why you like it so much, and how you do everything.
Sure. Well, first of all, I came from my mother. I think all of us did. All the story started about 11 years ago, back in 2010. Actually, 2008. Market crash. Was living in Southern California. Was doing marketing for real estate and mortgage professionals, and I quickly found myself with nobody to sell my product or service with because they were going out of business because banks weren't lending. So there was nobody giving loans, nobody buying houses. We opened in 2008. So I said, well, I guess this is where chapter 2 will begin. And I spent 2008 to 2010 just doing nothing. I was a non-contributing member to society, and I think a lot of people were just kind of down and out anyway with the recession. But I'd been active with social since the inception, really, since 2004. So I said, why don't I turn this into a business? And but how am I going to do that? I really don't know. So I had a friend that worked for Tony Robbins at the time, and mutual friends connected me with another friend of ours that was on a core team that traveled with him, and we linked up for a cocktail and had a quick conversation about what was next for me. And I didn't have an answer for her. I said, I don't know. And she looked at me and said, that's a problem. Like, that's a big problem. And I'm like, not really. I'm trying to figure it out. I understand that. But while you're trying to figure it out and you're in limbo, if you will, what's the world put on Sebastian? And I thought, interesting. So she said, you should start a YouTube channel. You'd have a bunch of subscribers. You're clearly good at this. So I thought to myself, there's a lot of buzz around social media, a lot of buzz around social buzz in general, maybe social buzz TV. Hey, that's a good name. So I sent that to a designer, came back, which is still to this day, the social buzz TV logo. So I was adamant about creating a business and a brand that was not only sustainable, but people would be investing in myself and what I had to offer. And what I had to offer was helping you better understand what you don't know that you don't know about social media, how this whole social media thing is not going away, even though it's the very beginning and foreign to a lot of people and seems like a non-necessity. It very much is. Right around that same time, I met a guy by the name of Gary Vaynerchuk, and Gary forever altered the path that I was on, and I had the unique opportunity of developing a relationship with Gary, and just became a phenomenal mentor over the course of me building my brand. And he'd always enforced the fact of being able to create content and a brand and getting a personal brand specifically. So it was great that I wanted to start Social Buzz TV, but it was also very imperative that I build a personal brand, because like Gary said so brilliantly, your personal brand in perpetuity is your reputation. And I never forgot that. So I said, great, what does this look like to be able to create a brand, then but also be able to create a personal brand? Well, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about being on stage in front of a camera, in front of an audience, and bringing my energy to a room. So I know that I'm definitely a speaker. A few years after that, I got the opportunity to write my first book, Social Media Sucks If You Don't Know What You're Doing. And that was my overview on the questions that I would constantly get from people pertaining to social media. So I would help people with their social media. I wrote a book, a story about social media. I would speak on the topic of social media, and I started very humbly, chambers, Rotary clubs, anybody to give me a microphone, an audience to speak. I was there. As it came out, I was able to define my speaking career more legitimately because I was starting to grow a little bit, and I was starting to gain popularity, even though social was very early on. Part of that equation was that the speaking business in general is extremely saturated. Nobody wants to pay speakers. Everyone's a speaker, and that. And I thought, wait a second, how do I carve my piece of the pie out of here and be able to get on stage? I thought, wait a second, if I MC these events that people want to speak at, well, I'm on stage for the entire event, an hour, and being able to reach people in the audience is going to be that much easier because I wear bow ties, and you never forget meeting me ever. It just doesn't happen. So I started knocking on doors of some social media conferences where I could learn, I could connect with people that I looked up to, and be able to further my craft while defining my craft as an MC. So I got my first opportunity to gig called Social Fresh, which is a social media conference, and to continue to do that for 3 or 4 years. I went from days of, hey, I'll do it for free, just don't, just get me there and feed me, to being able to command, several $1,000s a day to be able to facilitate MC services. So I got my real big break with a brand called digitalmarketer.com that hosts a large conference called the Traffic and Conversion Summit in San Diego.
Right. Very familiar with it.
Yeah, had the opportunity to team up a digital marketer, and that just busted the can wide open to opportunity, because we're talking 6,000 to 10,000 people in the crowd, and digital marketer being the true pioneers of the digital marketing space and having a tremendous amount. And that is like the go-to conference for marketers. In fact, that's where I met our mutual friend Grant Wise. He was in the audience one year, called me later and booked me to MC his live event. So that ripple effect still continues on here, but once I was able to secure that opportunity, in addition to continuing to build Social Buzz TV, I knew I was onto something, because I thought, well, I'm a published author. I speak, I MC my personal brand. And then I've also got my business brand where I help brands flush out their digital strategy with social media. That was all fine and dandy till about 2016, 2015. I started to feel a nudge that there's got to be more here within the social media space. And the last thing that I want to be referred to, nothing wrong with these positions, but the last thing I want to be referred to, a social media manager, or a with guy, or that social media guy. Like, I just didn't resonate with.
That's so bad, though.
I think it's bad. It's just not for me. So
cool.
There's nothing wrong with these titles. They just didn't work for me, because I knew something more. I knew there was a niche within this space that I could figure out. And I had a friend challenge me in 2016 to Christian to help people start a podcast. And that idea came to me just as quick as could be. And that's what is now the podcastlaunchlab.com. So I spent about 18 months figuring out who my ideal client was. And I quickly realized that it was somebody just like me. It was an entrepreneur, a marketer, a brand that understood that their natural next step was to start a podcast. So I created the podcastlaunchlab.com in 2016, which is a turnkey proven podcast launch solution to take marketers and entrepreneurs from idea to tunes in 90 days or less. So I made that move in 2016. Haven't looked back since. It's all that I do. I am a podcaster, but I also, my plan is help better understand what is possible with them figuring out why they want to start a podcast, and then helping to get them to the finish line. So my second book came out in December. It's called Podcasts Suck. If you don't have one, and it's everything I know about starting a podcast, I put my heart, soul, and brain in the book, because I get questions over and over again. And while my YouTube channel is a phenomenal resource to be able to get people to, I wanted to be able to share. I believe that part of success and knowledge comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. That responsibility is lifting as you climb. If you know something that somebody else doesn't, it is your duty to be able to facilitate getting that message out. And I've been able to do that through the content that I create and the books that I write, the talks that I give, and then even with the MC, very strategic with the gigs that I choose to involve myself in, because I want to make sure that there's some sort of crossover and resonating with the brand that I'm working with, so that there's opportunity for me to connect and meet people. So that's my story. Sticking to it, Dave.
Awesome, man. So let me ask you a couple of questions about that. So podcast, everybody, I listen to this podcast, and I love podcasts, and this podcast and that podcast. What's the reason for a real estate agent to start a podcast, and what kind of, engagement or what kind of traction can they get with a podcast?
Well, for starters, podcast for a real estate professional is not designed to talk about real estate. It's just not at all, because any type of content online really is not designed for real estate. I mean, real estate realtors and real estate professionals think that their content is very important on social media, but I think it's very much secondary, because people are making one of the single largest financial transactions in their entire life.
Right.
And that decision is not made based on some pretty high definition pictures posted on Facebook. That decision is made based on the individual that they are considering doing business. So with that being said, it's all about credibility and reputation. It always has been for real estate professionals.
Right.
But social media has spoiled real estate professionals, and real estate is a genre and a world that it's not difficult to get into, but it's difficult to build a reputation. It's difficult to build a book of business, and it's difficult to build that know, like, and trust factor on there. So I always like to put myself in the shoes of a real estate professional. If I was a realtor, what would my podcast be about? Well, I would probably start a podcast about what I'm extremely passionate about. And it's passion. I talk about, underwater basket weaving, but I'm a real estate professional and I crush it in the real estate game. But my podcast is about underwater basket weaving. I think is fascinating, and people are like, wow, this guy Sebastian's a likable, excitable guy. He talks about underwater basket weaving, but he's actually a realtor. Yeah, but believe it or not, he's a realtor down in Miami. So it's that secondary association with it. I don't think that people care about, what your new listing is, what's in escrow, what just closed. I know another offer came in. I just don't, I hear too much of that noise happening online and humble brag, if you will. And it just simply doesn't work when it comes to content. What does work is real estate professionals being able to figure out, what can I talk about that I'm passionate about, that I can talk intelligently about, that can complement not only my personal brand, but my brand as a real estate professional, that will resonate with people, that if and when they make a decision to actually purchase, buy, sell, or invest in a piece of real property, I'm their obvious choice because they've been able to connect with me via my content.
So let me ask this question. People don't care if you just sold a house or closed a house or got a new listing. They don't give a shit about that?
They do when they talk to you, but I don't think a Facebook post tells that story.
Thank you. Okay, so I've been criticized of being too critical of agents that do that, but I'm critical of the agents that actually do that all of the time. Right? That's their only posting. That's their only stuff. And if it's not that, then there's the agent that's posting, stuff that they either bought or a service that they're using, that kind of stuff. And there's nothing personal about it. There's nothing going deep on them. Would you think that podcasts are going to allow agents to go more deep on them and who they are really as a person, rather than just as a guy that writes contracts?
It's a great question. My immediate response is, if I'm a real estate professional and I'm crushing it and I'm doing open houses, and when open houses happen, or in mask or whatever it might be, I got a podcast, I'm recording a podcast during that open house, and I'm inviting somebody strategic into that interview that I can have a conversation with, that may benefit or may or not benefit from it, but I'm creating content around. So if I'm podcast, I'm doing it and I'm weaving it into the business that I'm doing. What I don't see is there's a giant gap in between being able to effectively communicate what your product and service is that you're marketing, in this case,
right,
and then really educate, motivate, and differentiating you and the property and the listing, whatever you want to call it. What I see is people walking through with their phone, brand new listing. I just hammered the sign in the yard. Let me walk you in real quick on my cell phone and show you around.
There you go.
Not happening. Going live. Let me just give you a quick. It's not, because it's got to be perfect, and we've got to get a drone, and we've got to always got to be just this perfect thing. And no one cares about the perfection. They care about what's in it for them. They care about what's available on the actual listing. And is this a property that's going to actually work for them? And as a professional, it is your responsibility and duty to tee all of those options up, so that people feel comfortable going, you know what, this is my guy or this is my gal, and I take a look at. He's doing things differently. The guy walked through, went live, saw him on his Instagram stories, and then when he was done, he teed his, he set up his phone on the patio table and did a cannonball in the pool, all dressed. This is a guy that I want to do business with. This is unconventional while still being professional. I mean, I remember a story of Guns N' Roses old road manager telling them when they struggled if they did a show 2 days in a row in a city and they were struggling with ticket sales on that second day, they would just have Axl go throw a television out the hotel and it'd be on the front page of the newspaper the next day, and tickets would sell out to day 2. And I never thought about that example. It's like, you've got to take things, you know how many realtors there are in the state of Florida, in the state of New York, in the state of California? You are one of millions. And so what does that mean? It's kind of like the social media space, speakers, etc. You are one of millions. So that means you've got to make some noise with still being able to stay within your brand, but be able to get people's attention to go, wow, this is different, number one. And number two, this guy can get the job done, or this gal can get the job done. That's what you want to be able to communicate through your what's called high definition. Whoops, that was my bad. Exactly what realtor content. That was my road. That was my roadcaster, my sound machine. I hit it with my elbow.
So two things I want to hit with you, right? So if you saw I put on the screen, a buddy of mine telling me that I'm too critical. I get accused of that all the time, but you know, my position is that you got to be different, like what you said. Like the guy that sets his phone up and does that catalog, right? I mean, that cannonball into the pool. You don't know if he can get the job done, but you certainly want to be his pal and you want to work with him just to see what he's doing. And there's something else.
Forget meet the guy. Can we just call him? I mean, this seems to be, I don't see it. I just see that, look at my new listing and I just closed something and look at these HD pictures and here's my drone and here's the this and here's the that. And I just think that it's doing is fueling and feeding the agent's ego. It's doing nothing for the person that really matters, which is the end user, the person that's making a decision to buy, sell, or invest in a piece of real property. I think that's the focal point there. I think
you're absolutely right. I know you're absolutely right. And it's really, really consistent with my thought process. Here's the thing, right? So that kind of thought, that kind of posting of, I just got a new listing. I got this, I got that. That's like what I call the 1980s thinking of marketing, right? Where you had to go in, there was no social media. You went into your listing appointment with what we call the brag book, right? I remember in 2003 or 4, I had an agent that was like the top agent in her company in 1985, and she still had that certificate in her brag book, right? And I said, everybody said if I said something to her, she'd get pissed off at me, right? So I never said anything. It's 1985. Nobody really gives a shit about 18 years ago, right? But here's the thing. When that's all you're doing, and I see that, as you said, noise on social media, it's crap, right? The other thing I want to bring out, which you said, put the sign in the ground, go inside, do a quick live. You said it doesn't have to be perfect. And one of my favorite lines that I use all the time is the imperfection is the connection. It's extremely important to do that. You just agree with that, right?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you that it is all about the connection people are making with you and how you're showing up for people. And your content speaks a lot to how you're actually showing up. And it's just being done wrong. Before, over the past 10 years, it's been, okay, cool. Well, we've gone from printing up flyers and door hangers to just showing up and throwing up on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I mean, people really post. I gave a talk for a group of realtors a year before last down in Key West. And I said, has anyone ever closed a deal based on a LinkedIn post? You got one asshole in the back of the room that's going to raise their hand, right? But very, very rare is that going to happen. And my point to that was, don't not post something on LinkedIn, but I don't know that your property listings are the best space for that. It's just you got to know the type of content you're creating, but also know where your audience is. And I think real estate professionals mistake the idea that, you just never know. So it's post and pray. So it's show up and throw up and post and pray.
Right.
Wait for that phone call.
Right.
But I believe.
It's like the agent that sends out thousands of postcards and does no follow-up and says that doesn't work.
Yeah.
They're waiting. What they're doing is they're throwing shit against the walls they possibly can to see what sticks.
Yeah.
So, talk to me about what a content strategy for a real estate agent should look like in your opinion.
coming up with something that complements something that they can get excited about, that complements their brand as a real estate professional. That's for them to decide what that actually looks like. But creating content around town, if I'm selling in a specific area around town, it's my role and responsibility as a real estate professional to educate people about the area, about the schools, the restaurants, the places, the areas, the parks, the golf, the tennis, the why people want to live here, the type of the type of neighborhood that it is, what type of properties are available in that specific area, and educating people. That type of content is okay pertaining to sharing it on social. But this whole new listing, here's my new listing. I think it's fallen on deaf ears.
I agree with you. So let's get into your real thing in your new book. Podcasts suck if you don't have one. Let's talk about podcasts. Let's talk about the importance of them. Just talk about the contents of what's in your book and what it's all about. So start talking to me about that, and let's get really into this subject.
So I decided to write the book so that I could help everyone understand what I know or what I've learned thus far about podcasting, but I also wanted to be able to create something that if you read this book and not just read it, but you actually do what it says, you're going to have everything you need in order to start a podcast. And you don't need me. Most people find, well, I read it, I know what's involved, but there's a lot of work. And then, they call me, and sometimes it's an opportunity. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I get emails and messages from people saying, hey, I read your book. It completely shifted my thought process on what's possible with starting a podcast. So the idea was to be able to share everything that I know about starting a podcast. I talk a lot about I talk a lot about finding your why. I talk a lot about personal development. These are all huge components when creating content and podcasts, because the average podcast isn't going to make it past 7 episodes. So with that being known, before it goes to the podcast graveyard, so knowing that, what's the best way to be able to prevent a show from ending up in the podcast graveyard? Well, that's to continue recording episodes. So first and foremost, a mindset perspective, are you committed enough to actually complete the work that you're setting out? Because otherwise, in the very beginning, no one's going to care. And no, your first episode is going to, and you're going to be in your head, and you're going to be talking, what am I doing? I'm not sure about this. I wasn't there. So that whole so the mindset is huge, especially in the beginning, making that decision that, yes, I am in a stress, but I'm also going to continue to stick to actually doing the work and seeing this thing play out and see what's on the other side of starting this thing. But first and foremost is getting clear on a why. A lot of people want to start a podcast, got no clue why they want to start a podcast. Well, I mean, Joe Rogan. And that's just not good enough for a reason. You want to start a podcast because you've got value that you want to share with the world. You want to have a conversation with people. You want to make new connections. You want to develop new relationships, and you want to leave people different than when you found them before they actually press play on your podcast. Now, as a brand, you're creating content to help people better understand more about you, what your message is, what your product or service is, what your business is all about, what your personal brand is, whatever it may be. And you're doing it to connect with people that are smarter than you, cooler than you, have done more than you. And it's a very productive way of being able to, or productive and constructive way of picking someone's brain.
Right. So for me with this broadcast, I'm just getting used to it. I'm just getting there after 140 weeks in a row. So I'm just getting used to it a little bit. So I'm getting there. Would you say?
I'd say so. You're doing a great job.
Thanks. So, all right. So you decide to do a podcast. You're going to commit to it, like, and you need a reason. So my reason was, honestly, I had seen people do this. I had seen people do it, and I saw them miss a week, and then pick it up 2 or 3 weeks later and say, well, sorry, we had this coming up. And I'm saying, well, I don't get that. If it's, I grew up in, I grew up in the days when you wanted to be home for a show, no matter what it was. Like, I'll give you a really bizarre example. When I was in college, and this is going to date me. When I was in college, we used to leave the bar at 11:15 p.m. to go back to wherever we could to watch Saturday Night Live. Then we would watch Saturday Night Live and go back out, right? That's what we did. And we did that every Saturday night. There's also times during the week, I can't go out tonight. I got to watch so-and-so. We had, that was the kind of thing, right? So it was a consistent
Monday nights with Alf.
Okay, see, Alf, right? Same thing. I mean, it was like you didn't want to miss it. If you missed it, it was, oh no, what did I miss? And you didn't want anybody to talk to you about it or you had to find out about it because you missed it. Right. And the only time you were going to see that show was on reruns in the summer.
Sure.
Right. So the consistency of missing something to me it doesn't make sense. You want to keep going and be consistent with everything and not miss it and have people want to see what you're doing. I believe that's why I've been able to get some of the great people on here that I've had. I mean, I've got you, I've got Tom Ferry, I've had John Cheplack on this week, Brent Gove. So, it's a matter of consistency that people have to build. Okay, so you decide to do it, you're committed to it. What's next? What's that?
Doing it. Actually starting and saying, okay, great, what am I going to call the show? Okay, now that I've got a name, who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to interview? How am I going to record it? Is it going to be via Zoom? Should I buy a USB microphone on Amazon? Do I need to get a full-blown setup? Am I going to use my AirPods that come with my cell phone? What's the most realistic way for me to be able to actually start creating something here? So we've got 15 or so steps in the podcast launch process. So it's not we'll do these 3 steps and you're off to the races. But I think the core decision is, first of all, why am I starting a podcast? What am I going to talk about? And who am I going to have a conversation with? Once you can define those 3 things, then everything else is just logistics and mechanics.
Okay, so you've decided to do the podcast. You've got a title for it, and you know who your audience is going to be. How are you pushing your podcast to your audience then?
So you've got to create content around the podcast episode. That's not the easiest thing to do because you're marketing a podcast. You're marketing a piece of audio right now. Being able to what an audio piece of content looks like isn't the easiest thing. So you've got to create content like micro videos and utilizing the replay from the Zoom video, or create an image on top of an audio piece that gets saved as a movie, and then being able to have a call to action of, hey, click on the link to listen to the episode. So marketing the podcast episode, sending a link out to your email newsletter. I guess you could think on Facebook, they don't do so well, and on LinkedIn, etc. But having an actual piece of micro content from the episode with a call to action to click on a specific link is the most ideal.
Right. And when we talk about doing different things and using it as a podcast, like for instance, this broadcast, after this broadcast, this will be downloaded and we upload it to Buzzsprout for a podcast. Right. Correct. And then we will take pieces of this and we will cut it up into segments, and we will use it as we're using this broadcast as pillar content as taught by VaynerMedia, right? Pillar content. And then we're going to use it for different things along the way. So this actually downloads with just using this great product called StreamYard. We download the video and just the audio to be able to upload it to Buzzsprout, and we push it out that way.
Correct. So you can take your archive video. Let's just call it Zoom because then I have a StreamYard. So you take you do an interview with somebody, you record it, you get the archive of the video and the audio. You can go chop up the video and turn it into micro content and post it and continue to market it based on the piece of micro content. And then the call to action is the actual link to the episode to listen. But yes, you can extract 10, 15 pieces of content out of one specific podcast episode just due to technology of like a Zoom call.
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've decided to do it. We've committed to it. We got the equipment, and look, I mean, you're using I would imagine that's a USB mic. That's a condenser mic.
No, I've got a full studio set up here. So, but this would be a USB mic. You could plug this in.
Okay, and I have my Yeti right here.
Correct.
Right. So I use that, and it's connected into my laptop, and I also have used headsets. I've used Bluetooth headsets. I've used the headset that comes with your iPhone.
Those work fine to get started. I mean, let's find out, make sure we have a concept, and let's make sure we're actually going to work before we start swinging and buying equipment. That's always my recommendation. Let's just go download Anchor.fm, go get your headset from your iPhone, create a show name, go through the process of being able to actually create. Exactly, Matt said I use an iPhone and Anchor. That's all that you need when you get started. Make sure that your idea is valid. Your proof of concept's actually going to stick. People actually want to talk to you, that you're actually excited about what you're doing. The last thing you want to do, you can go out there and buy all the equipment, get everything out and Buzzsprout and BizSprout and this Sprout and all that stuff. And you get on it, and then, you get into it 2 episodes in, and you want to do this because it's work.
Right.
It's work.
Right.
Most people don't want to do the work. They get in there and realize, oh, that's a lot involved. We'll get back to this. Let's shelf this for a little while.
Right. So I didn't turn these episodes, these broadcasts into podcasts till I was, I'm going to say episode 100, 90, something like that. I didn't start doing it until then. I figured I was pretty set in what I was doing. And you know what? I mean, it's great. And, so you have to be able to, like you said, I mean, the big word is commitment. And then if you want to step it up, then you go out and buy some equipment. Like I've had the Yeti mic for several years, actually probably 3 or 4 years, but I used it to record trainings. I used it for other things, just for better audio. And audio is very important, right? So you've recorded it, you've got the podcast set up, you had a name for it. How do you monetize it? Can you monetize a podcast?
A whole chapter about this in my book. I think there's 5 specific ways you can monetize a podcast. The first is you can sell coffee cups, t-shirts, hand sanitizer products, things that you have of your own. You can also sell your own business products, services, whatever your service is, on whatever whatever you do. You can join affiliate programs. You can talk about specific products or things that are available online, like on Amazon, and be able to include your affiliate links. So people decide that, oh, that sounds really cool. I want one of those. They go and buy it. You're compensated from it. And then you can go to the traditional advertisers and sponsor route too, where you've got to go in there and you've got to prove how cool you are and show people that, hey, I've got, I've got this many downloads. This is my audience. And I think that that's the same as we share the same audience. So I think there would be some benefit there. And then you can go in and, the best part about podcasting is you're making up as you go. There is no rules. I see people all the time create their own advertising packages that are extremely low priced and go out and pitch specific people that are in their audience as they're just getting started. Having a sponsor on your show, ads on your show, whatever it might be, that's a mixed conversation with podcasters. Some people think it muddies the waters. Some people think it's beneficial and it adds credibility. You're just gonna have to find out what works, best for you.
Right. Exactly.
So those are the 5 main ways: sell products, affiliate programs, JV deals, strategic guests. You get on the show, talk about what they do. If somebody buys on the information they shared, then you're compensated accordingly. And then affiliate programs with anything. I just use Amazon as an example. There's hundreds and hundreds of affiliate programs out there that you can put, go to thisproduct.com/Dave for more information.
Right. So let's talk about how a real estate agent might set up an entire podcast, set it up to broadcast it, set it up to get it out there, set it up to market himself, and then to monetize it. What would be the process for a real estate agent to be able to do that? Everything I just said. What would be their process aside from commitment?
Well, everything we just got done talking about.
Right. So their process would be
the right mindset, your why, and committing to the work that's actually done. Then pulling out Anchor, out your headphones, creating the show, start recording some episodes, and see if your crazy ideas are even realistic. If you start to get some traction, well, then upgrade your microphone. If you start to get excited about, doing interviews, fine. Continue to find more people. If you realize you want to get on an actual podcast hosting platform versus Anchor, then you can migrate from Anchor over to a podcast. And it's that crawl, walk, run process on here. But I just think that there's too many people that want to rush into the content game, specifically with a podcast or whatever it might be, and don't understand the work that's involved with it. Because you look at a real estate professional, there's a lot of work involved with a deal. Just sell the house and pick up a check. In a perfect world, you could do that. I know there are some real estate people that think that's the process, but I know there's a lot involved with that process. So staying realistic to say, hey, can I actually do my job and maintain 7-day-a-week, 24-hour job as a real estate professional and create content? What's realistic?
Right, exactly. And the whole thing is, so let's talk about promotion. Can we talk about promotion of a podcast for a real estate agent trying to get his name out there? Like we said, it's not going to be about real estate, but it's going to be about the real estate professional. So is there a certain way to promote it, or is it Facebook ads? Is it Google ads? What is it? How are they going to get people to their podcast so they actually can promote themselves?
I do talk a little bit in the book about being able to post an audiogram or a piece of micro content, and the call to action is the actual link to the episode, and running $1 a day on Facebook or boosting a post or promoting a post on Instagram. Absolutely. But I think the organic route's always going to win based on you developing relationships with people, and those people that you're developing relationships with have a vested interest in wanting to share your content because they're part of your tribe. They like what you do, they like what you do, and they resonate with your content. I think that's the best strategy. Can you run ads on a podcast episode and content? Absolutely. Could it spike things? Maybe. But this thing's a marathon, and too many people want to run to this thing thinking it's all going to happen, and then 90 days in, they're like, my podcast sucks. I don't know. Maybe you suck. I don't know if it's the podcast. So you got to really evaluate what's not working and be realistic with that, and be realistic with yourself. True change in anything, especially with ourselves, comes from telling ourselves the truth first, and then after that, we can go fix else.
Right. So let me ask you another question having to do with podcasting over the last year. Okay. So it's probably just about a year ago, that we were all set up into shelter in place, quarantine, the whole thing. How did that, if it at all, changed podcasting? Did it change what you do? Did you shift to another method? Did you shift to another type of content? What changed for you, Sebastian, if anything?
My business exploded. Everyone was home, stuck at home with, twiddling their thumbs. So all the shit you were putting off, you all of a sudden have time for anything but, stay at home. But let's finally get that podcast going. And we've got to get a decent mic anyway and a decent webcam, because we've got Zoom calls and we've got business and normal meetings and things that have to take place anyhow. Hey, what would it look like to start a podcast? And the next thing you know, in May of 2020, podcasting equipment is sold out on Amazon, which I loved. It's great. Because I was just sitting here with popcorn, in a big fat cup of I told you so. Something eventually there was going to be something that was going to come along. There would be that awakening moment to go, yeah, now's probably a good time for me to finally push my bullshit aside and start doing that I said I was actually going to do. There's no follow through with the content is the challenge. Being stuck at home for 12 months, you're climbing the walls. So what else are you going to do? So I think a lot of people have decided to move forward on the things they've been off because people have had more time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that whatever they decided to start doing actually stuck and they continued with it. But I think things have changed drastically. I haven't changed anything on my end. All I've changed is the price of the program and the type of people that I want to actually work with. I mean, I'm very, very and extremely picky with the people that I work with. Our program isn't for everyone. It's not the cheapest option on the block. And it's not always that I have to get excited about what they're talking about and what they want to do. Because if I can't get excited, how's anybody else excited? And if I can't get excited, we're not going to enjoy the process of unpacking and creating your show and getting it launched.
Right. So let's talk about your program and what is it all about what's in your book? Can people just buy your book and not have to use your program, or talk about your program and how great it is?
I purposely tell you everything that I know about how to start a podcast, because you're not going to do it, and you're going to call me. You're going to read the book, and maybe every now and then I get a couple do-it-yourselfers that really get in there and just get it done, and they launch the show. I had a local news anchor here in Florida, an NBC affiliate, hit me up a couple months ago. New to the area, I want to start a podcast about cycling. Walked him through the park, told him everything that I do and how I could help, etc. I get a message from him yesterday. The guy's got a full-blown show launched, ready to go. He just did it because he committed to it. He's an athlete too. He's a cyclist, etc. in addition to his day gig. But he also understood, I'll never forget our conversation. He understood the value in the fact that his position is in hot water, not him specifically. Working for local traditional media outlet, your days are numbered. And if you don't think that, well, you may be slightly delusional. And I think it's extremely important to say, not that local news will ever go away. It's important. I understand that. But I think it's evolving and it's changing. And the way local news has approached these anchors and people that work in the traditional, here's Twitter, go use it. Not why you need to, just go use it. Create content, go run with it. And before if you had a side hustle while you had a job like that, it just didn't work. Now, if you don't have a side hustle and you don't have a brand or a blog or a YouTube channel, well, then you may not get the gig. So it's funny that I realized that having a conversation with this individual, he was so clear about this. And he goes, no, I get it. And I go, no, I can hear it in your voice. Pun intended. I can hear it in your voice of, hey, listen, it's a great gig until it's not a gig anymore. And things are constantly, if we go look at a toll booth, go to walk into a McDonald's, you're very rarely talking to a cashier. Go see all these things that, we run the gamut of, Airbnb and Netflix and Uber and everything that has just completely disrupted the world as we know it, and disrupted it for good reason. They've disrupted it for one specific reason and one specific reason only, because it makes life easier. And we live in a world where we desire, well, we also live in this go fast, I want it yesterday world that says, I'll pay $40 for a whatchamacallit bar if I can have it right now. I'll watch the whole freaking season of Ozark this weekend because it's available and I don't have to wait because I want it right now. So with that being said, knowing that that's the mentality of where we're at, why not as a brand or a professional adapt to where we're actually at and be able to move with the times so that you aren't disrupted? Think about being the disruptor versus the disrupted. If those two options are, which one do we really want? Do we want to be the disruptor or do we want to be disrupted? I personally like to be disruptor, and that's the road less. That's the uncomfortable. That's that, ooh, I don't really know about. It's kind of unfamiliar. It's not safe. I just don't think there's any room for safe when it comes to technology, Dave. Technology.
I don't think so either. I don't think so either. I mean, I interviewed Tom Ferry a little less than a year ago as the pandemic was getting, full force and everybody was staying at home. And I said to Tom, I said, Tom, what's the next disruptor coming out? What's going to happen? I mean, we've got all these things, all this technology. He said, Dave, there is no technology coming out that's going to change the world. There is nothing out there. I talk to these companies all the time. There's nothing out there. Little did we know how we all thought the pandemic was going to be a few weeks. We're going to be at home for a few weeks. Here we are, I think Canada's still shut down right now, right? And the thing is that the pandemic was the disruptor. It allowed everything else to accelerate. Like, for instance, I've been doing Zoom meetings for 6 years. I've been teaching virtual real estate for 6 years, except I couldn't find a lot of people that wanted to get involved in it. Now everybody needs to be involved in it. So the disruptor was the pandemic that allowed all these other outlets, just as you just said, change. It made them not only change, but is more evolved than anything else. Force evolution and fast evolution. Just like you said, I mean, the TV gig used to be a great thing. Everybody looked up to this guy. They saw him all the time. I can't tell you the last time I watched TV news.
Right. Me,
I don't know.
A hurricane or a natural crisis or the election. I wasn't. I mean, even then I wasn't watching it that much. But that was my only act. That's my only need. Like, I'd rather wake up in the morning and punch myself in the face than turn on local news. Just not interesting.
I got to tell you, if I need to know what's going on with the weather, used to be, you could be wrong 90% of the time and still gather a paycheck on TV. Now I got this. I don't need. It's going to tell me what's going to happen in 10 minutes. Rather than 10 hours or 10 days, I don't need it.
Absolutely.
So let's get back to your program. How do people get in touch with you? How do people start working with you? And what's it all about? And how does it work?
So I've got a 90-day program that takes marketers and entrepreneurs from idea to iTunes in 90 days or less. So you get to work one-on-one with me for the first 60 days. We work together once a week and we unpack. We start with a blank sheet of paper. And at the end of 90 days, if you do the work that I do, then you're going to be at the finish line and have an actual launch show with your first 7 episodes. So we cover everything soup to nuts. Everything you need in order to start a podcast is involved with the program. So there is nothing other than I'm ready, I'm in, let's sign up. So outside of equipment's a personal decision. We used to provide mics for our students, and then people would get the mic and they go, well, I want a different one. Okay, we don't provide mics anymore. But now, but as far as everything you need, as far as production and how's the intro work and where do I find background music and how's my show get into iTunes and Spotify and how do I plan an episode? How do I interview someone? Where do I find? How does it all come together? How do we upload it? Where does my podcast live? Covering everything that needs to be done with the podcast launch while working with me one-on-one. So at the end of 90 days, you've got 7 episodes that are produced. That doesn't necessarily mean you launch your podcast episodes, but you've got 7 episodes that have been recorded and produced and are ready to be. You can launch with the first couple, and then you've got 5 in the hopper, and you just continue decide what you're going to continue to do ongoing with your interview flow. Is it once a week? Is it twice a month? You decide what that looks like, but once you decide, stick with it. And some clients, most around after the show is launched because I couldn't get rid of them if I wanted to. Oh, but it says podcast launch lab. We forgot the C in podcast there.
You fixed that.
You go. It's just on your that one's good. That one's the runner at the bottom there. As far as once the show's launched, that's always a big question. Great, Sebastian, when we're done with your program, what do we do then? And I usually say, beat it. And I'm just kidding. I give them an option to be able to stick around and we have an ongoing production solution where we can continue to rinse and repeat what we've done through the launch program, which is you record an episode, you upload it to us, our team produces it, we send it back to you, you upload it, and you move on with your day and your rinse process. So that's been really cool because that helps contribute to what my end goal is here, is building a podcast network. So the podcastlaunch.com, while it is a podcast launch solution, it's also an ongoing production solution too, and it's becoming a podcast network. Every show we launch goes into that network. Once the network's got 100 shows, then we're able to go in there and ancillary services, or as I like to say casually, we're able to sell things to that network of shows we've already launched. Go back in there and say, hey, Dave, your show's grown, it's matured, and you're at a point now that you may want to start looking at our guest booking and research solution, where we get on there and get you on strategic podcasts, get other guests on your podcast, and help grow the show through that, and then introduced revenue models and play matchmaker with advertisers, sponsors, biz dev deals, JV deals, affiliate programs, things where we can get out there, shape a deal, and come back to you and go, hey, listen, we just got the phone with Zillow. They're interested in being on your podcast. Willing to pay you $2,000 a month. We take 30% of that. You'll never tell me no any day. So to be able to do that process of, we've initially monetized by selling a solution to launch a podcast. We have an ongoing revenue that allows us to continue to shows that we've launched that keeps on revenue coming in. And then once the network has been established, I don't know, maybe it's 50, it's 100 shows. And the reason it's going to take longer than I thought it was going to is because not every show launches. And if they do launch, it doesn't mean they're going to stick around and become a podcast. So it's taking the actually launched that stick and they continue to that are becoming part of the actual podcast network. And then once all of that is all bundled up, we've got to work with the solution and production and existing that's monetized with solutions to be able to sell to that network. And then we sell it off to Spotify for some ludicrous amount of money. And then I'm, on to the next thing. But now it's identifying marketers, entrepreneurs, and be part of the actual process of starting a podcast, joining in the network, having us handle ongoing production, and then becoming part of the network. And then the only thing really outside of that that's happening is the coaching that I found a lot of existing podcasts to me and go, listen, I've already launched my show, but I still want to work with you. So how can we help me with content? Can you help me with marketing strategy? Can you help me audit the entire show and start over again? That happens a lot too. People call and go, what do we do? Things aren't working. I'm like, you need to start over, like from scratch. Yeah. I can walk people through that process and I do some monthly coaching on that. And that's become just an additional supplement to the revenue that comes into the podcast launch lab. And I thoroughly enjoy it. I mean, there are worse things than being paid, $500 an hour to talk to somebody, answer them questions about what you already know and you're passionate about. So I'm crazy idea stuck finally. Taken, a long time because again, just like the social media world, it takes a while for people to start turning the corner and start understanding what's really going on and that this stuff is not anywhere. Podcasting is replacing radio. YouTube is replacing television as we know it. Print, traditional media, all that stuff, while it still may have a place in the world, has dropped in significance by leaps and bounds. If I called you 15 years ago and I said, hey, Dave, I've got a spot available at 10 a.m. on a local FM radio station for you to come in and talk about your real estate business. Do you want it? You wouldn't think about it, pray about it, sleep on it, talk about it, call about it. You would say yes. And then figure out how you could do to make it happen. Now, once you've inked that deal, never in a million years, unless you were delusional and just irresponsible, ever consider missing a week of recording that show or a day of recording that show. Why? Because guess what? One show miss, you're out. Why? Because breathing down that would love that opportunity and would love to jump on that opportunity on here. If people adapted that same mentality of back then of, wow, I mean, FM radio, I mean, TV, with where they're at now. If I commit to recording a new episode every single week, I commit to recording new content, putting a new YouTube up on YouTube each and every week, because if I don't do it, I'm out of here. I heard somebody on Clubhouse the other day talk about becoming an early adopter on LinkedIn and getting paid by LinkedIn to articles twice a week. And she said LinkedIn was very explicitly clear with me. If you miss one day, if you miss one article, you're out. And I thought to myself, wow, what life and business look like if we treated ourselves with those same type of boundaries. Interesting concept.
True. Hey, man, this has been a great broadcast. I thank you so much. I have learned a lot myself, and I've been doing this a long time, and I see things I've been doing wrong. How do people get in touch with you to talk to you about your process, talk to you about your program, et cetera? What do they have to do to find you?
Actually, that link you got up on the in there in the lower third, podcastlaunchlabnow.com, is a link directly to my calendar. That'll give you the opportunity to book a time with me. I'll talk to anybody for 10 or 15 minutes about what your idea is on starting a podcast. I would gladly talk you out of starting one too. Starting a podcast is not for everyone. There is a tremendous amount of work and commitment involved with that. You must have the right mindset. You must be very, very clear about what your why is of starting a podcast, because that stuff translates over. But here's the thing about starting a podcast, Dave. You just never, or any other content, starting a YouTube channel, you never know what's on the other side of actually doing the work and actually saying, I want to start a podcast because I've had a nudge to do it. I have an idea of what I want to do, and I don't know what's on the other side. It's like that quote from Martin Luther. You don't need to see the whole staircase. You need to see the first couple steps and just keep going. And that's kind of the reality with podcasting. But yeah, podcastlaunchlabnow.com brings you right to my calendar. You can check more about the company and the agency at podcastlaunchlab.com. Kind of similar URLs there, but that'll give you an opportunity. This will also allow you to time with, put you on my email list, and you get all kinds of, my new YouTube videos, free content around starting a podcast. So I'm just here to provide as much value as possible to people and show up on a daily basis and leave people different. Some people sign up for a program, some people hire me, some people don't. I'm not here to just get hired and have people join my program. I'm here to see people go. Well, I was thinking about starting a podcast, and then I met a guy named Sebastian. I read his book. I heard a talk he gave. I saw a post he did on LinkedIn, and I saw him on Dave Finale's show, and he forever altered thought process on what was possible with starting a podcast, and I was able to do it. And when I did, this happened. I just want to leave people different, Dave.
Fantastic. So I have two quick things we do to finish this up, and one is the last question I ask everybody. What can I do to help you grow your business? What can I do to help grow your business?
Just keep your ears peeled. And I want to podcast. Do you know where I should start?
Got it. And last but not least, Sebastian, as we've known each other a number of years, and you found out that at the end of every podcast, every broadcast, I give a hat, and that's why you came on the broadcast, because you wanted one, because you got to protect your head from that Florida sun, right?
Absolutely. Right.
I mean, so you get to get one of these great hats. Again, I want to thank you for being on today.
One more thing. The first time we met, you made fun of my bow tie. Do you remember that?
I did. I remember that. That's a number of years ago. You're absolutely right.
And here we are 4 years later, I'm on your show. So when someone makes fun of your clothes versus me, then that doesn't necessarily mean there's not going to be a relationship on the other side of that.
That's
hey, listen, bow ties
never
go out of style, because bow ties are never in style, Dave.
And that's right. They can never go out of style. Hey, man, I want to thank you so much for coming on. We'll talk soon. Please stay on for a minute. I'm just going to run out. Going to go out here, and then we'll be right back to talk with you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week with Christine Beckwith.
Podcasts suck if you don't have one. Yo.